The silence hung heavy in the hospital waiting room. It was almost 8 a.m. on a typical Tuesday, but nothing felt ordinary to those who knew the details. Rows of blue plastic chairs stood in precise lines, some occupied by people whose faces bore the weariness of sleepless nights and hearts burdened by uncertainty. The smell of disinfectant mingled with the aroma of reheated coffee from the machine in the corner, creating an atmosphere that oscillated between fragile hope and silent despair. Sitting in the third row, near the window overlooking the inner courtyard, was a woman of about 60. Her gray hair was pulled back in a simple bun, and her calloused hands rested on a worn synthetic leather purse. She wore a slightly faded navy blue knit sweater and a dark skirt that modestly covered her knees. Her aged, honey-colored eyes gazed at the floor with an infinite patience that held the weight of someone who had waited too long for too many things in life. Hope, that's what she was known as in the neighborhood where she had lived for over 30 years, had arrived at the hospital at 5:30 a.m. Her youngest daughter, Kara, 28, had been hospitalized for 3 days following a work accident that had left neurological damage still not fully understood by the doctors. Kara was the family's sole provider, working as a cleaning lady in a large commercial building downtown. Her modest salary supported her, her mother, and her 2 young children. The doctor had promised to give an update on her daughter's condition early in the morning, but the hours crawled by like snails on a hot summer day. Hope didn't complain, didn't sigh loudly, didn't tap her fingers impatiently like others around her. She simply waited, as she had learned to do throughout her life. She had waited for her husband to return from war. He never did. She had waited for the money to last until the end of the month. It almost never did. She had waited for her children to grow up healthy and safe. 2 had. 1 had fallen prey to drugs. And now Kara was here, between life and uncertainty. At 9:15 a.m., a young resident doctor in an impeccable white coat and with hurried steps crossed the waiting room. Hope raised her eyes, recognizing him as one of the doctors who had seen her daughter on the first day. She slowly rose, her joints protesting after 4 hours in the same position, and approached him with the humility of someone who asks, not demands. "Doctor, please," she said, her voice soft but firm. "I'm Kara's mother, room 16. You said you would have news this morning." The doctor looked at her for a second, his eyes already shifting to his vibrating cell phone in his pocket. "Oh, yes, we're still waiting for some test results. You need to be patient." His response was mechanical, as if he were reading from a manual of automatic replies. "Doctor, I understand, but it's been 3 days. My daughter has 2 young children, and I need to know." Hope tried to continue, but the doctor was already walking away, answering his phone without even looking back. She stood there for a few seconds, the unspoken words caught in her throat. It wasn't anger she felt, it was a deep, familiar sadness, born from the certainty that her pain didn't matter in this hurried world. She returned to her chair, and no one around seemed to notice what had happened. Life went on. Children cried, people flipped through old magazines. The loudspeaker announced names at irregular intervals. A nurse rushed past, carrying a stack of papers. Hope recognized her as someone who had spoken to her on the first day when Kara was admitted. "Excuse me, nurse," she called, rising again. "About my daughter." "That's not my area," the nurse replied without slowing her pace. "But I tried to talk to." "Go to reception." The nurse had already turned the corner, leaving Hope speaking alone in the hallway. 10:30 a.m. Hope walked to the reception desk, where 2 employees were chatting animated about a TV show they had watched the night before. One of them, a young woman with dyed blonde hair and long nails decorated with colorful designs, looked at her with the thinly veiled boredom of someone interrupted at an important moment. "Yes? Who's persistent?" asked one of the students.
Oh, you know, they want information every minute. They want to talk to the attending physician. They want to know everything. Simple folks, they don't understand that we have other more serious cases. The doctor chuckled softly, and some students joined in. And what's the prognosis? The student pressed. Still uncertain. She might recover completely, she might have permanent sequelae, but the family doesn't need to know that now, right? Let's leave them with hope. Hope felt the ground crumble beneath her feet. Not because of the medical information, she already knew the case was serious, but because of the way they spoke about her, as if she were an inconvenience, as if her concern were a nuisance. Simple folks. The words echoed in her mind like a cruel taunt. Joseph, who had overheard the entire conversation, felt something explode inside his chest. It wasn't anger. It was a deep, visceral indignation that came from somewhere very ancient in his soul. He stood up slowly, as if making a decision that would change the course of his life, or perhaps just the course of that day. He walked over to where the group of doctors were still talking, and his approach caused them to turn to him. There was something about his presence that commanded attention, a silent gravity that made people instinctively straighten up. "Excuse me," Joseph said, his voice calm but carrying an indefinable weight. The resident physician looked at him, slightly confused. "Yes, sir. Is there a problem?" "There's no problem at all. I'd like to introduce you to someone." Joseph turned to Hope, who watched him with wide eyes. "This lady is the mother of the patient in bed 16. Her name is Hope." The silence that fell was almost palpable. The students exchanged glances. The resident physician paled slightly, and the head nurse frowned. "Mrs. Hope," Joseph continued, "I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Joseph. I'm the director of the city health department." The words fell like stones into still water. Hope looked at him without fully understanding what was happening, but realizing that something had changed in the air around her. The doctors straightened up, and she could see recognition dawning in their eyes. "Sir," stammered the resident physician, "I didn't know you." "Didn't know what?" Joseph interrupted, but his voice remained calm, almost gentle. "Didn't know I was here? Didn't know I was watching? Or didn't know that people like Mrs. Hope deserve the same respect you would give to any other human being?"
Hope felt tears welling up, but this time they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of relief, of surprise, of gratitude for someone finally seeing her. "Doctor," said Joseph, addressing the resident physician, "Mrs. Hope has been here for almost 6 hours today. For 3 days, she has been coming to the hospital to seek information about her daughter. 3 days in which she has been treated as if she were an inconvenience, as if her concern were less important than your haste." The doctor tried to justify himself. "Sir, we have many cases, and—" "Every case has a family. Every family has a story, and every story deserves respect." Joseph turned to Hope. "Ma'am, could you tell me a little about your daughter?" Hope wiped her eyes with her sleeve, searching for the words. Her, her name is Kara. She's 28 years old. She's a mother of 2 young boys, 6-year-old John and 4-year-old Peter. She works as a cleaning lady. She's a hard-working girl, never caused any trouble for anyone, always took care of her family, always responsible." Her voice gained strength as she spoke. "She had an accident at work 3 days ago, fell from a tall ladder, hit her head. Since then, she's been here, and I don't know how she really is. I don't know if she'll be okay. I don't know how I'll explain to her grandsons if—" Her voice choked, and Joseph extended his hand, gently touching her arm. "You don't need to explain anything else. Doctor," he turned to the resident physician, "I want you to go right now and get Kara's complete medical record. I want you to explain to Mrs. Hope in clear and respectful language exactly what her daughter's condition is, what the prognosis is, and what the next steps of the treatment are." "But sir, I'm not the attending physician." "Then go get the attending physician.
Now, Joseph's voice remained calm, but there was steel in his words. And I want Mrs. Hope to be treated with the same courtesy and attention you would give to any member of your own families. The resident physician hurried out, and the students quickly dispersed. The head nurse remained, looking genuinely embarrassed. "Ma'am," she said, addressing Hope, "I apologize. Sometimes the rush of the hospital makes us forget that behind every bed there's a whole family suffering. It's not an excuse, but it's the reality." Hope nodded, still processing what had happened. "I understand you have a lot of work. I just wanted to know how my daughter is." "And you have every right to know," said Joseph. "It's not a favor they're doing, it's an obligation." While waiting for the attending physician, Joseph sat beside Hope. "Do you have other children?" he asked, genuinely interested. "I do. I had 4. One died in the war, another died young, drugs. Kara and Mark are left. Mark lives far away, has his own family. Kara is the one who takes care of me, even with her young children." "And the children's father?" "Left her when the youngest was born, said he didn't want responsibility." Hope smiled sadly. "But Kara is strong. She says she doesn't need anyone, that she and the boys manage on their own. But now she needs care, and the one who takes care of her is you." "Yes, it's always been like that in our family. One takes care of the other." Joseph nodded thoughtfully. There was something about this woman's story that touched him deeply. Perhaps it was the dignity with which she carried her burdens, or the way she spoke of her children, even those who were no longer there, with unconditional love. "Do you work?" "I did. I was a domestic worker my whole life. Now I'm retired, but the retirement is meager. I help by taking care of the grandchildren while Kara works, or worked." Her voice trailed off again. "Do the boys know their mother is in the hospital?" "They know she's sick. I didn't want to scare them with the details. They're with a neighbor right now, good people, but I can't abuse their kindness." Joseph felt his heart sink. This was a story that repeated itself thousands of times every day in every hospital in the country. Entire families balancing on a knife's edge, depending on each other to survive, without support networks, without safety nets, without anything but love and determination. "Do you have any religion?" "I'm Catholic. I attend the neighborhood church. Father John is a good man. He knows the whole community. He even came here on the first day, gave Kara the last rites as a precaution." "And what do you ask God for?" Hope smiled, and for the first time since Joseph had been observing her, her face lit up. "I ask him to take care of my daughter, and to give me strength to take care of my grandchildren if she can't do it anymore. I don't ask for miracles, you know. I ask for strength to accept whatever comes." Joseph swallowed hard. There was something deeply spiritual about this woman, a faith that wasn't naive, but matured by suffering. A faith that didn't expect the world to be fair, but that believed it was possible to find meaning even in injustice. 20 minutes later, the attending physician appeared. He was an older man, with graying hair and tired eyes, but he addressed Hope with genuine cordiality. "Ma'am, I apologize for the delay. I'm Dr. Fernandez, in charge of your daughter's case. I'd like to explain the current situation." Hope straightened up, her hands clasped on her purse. "Your daughter suffered a severe head injury. Fortunately, the latest tests show that there is no internal bleeding and the neurological signs are stabilizing. She woke up this morning and is responding well to stimuli." Hope let out a deep sigh of relief. "But," the doctor continued, "we still need to monitor her for a few more days. There may be some temporary sequelae, memory problems, coordination difficulties, but we believe that with physical therapy and follow-up, she can have a complete recovery." "Can I see her?" Hope asked, her voice choked with emotion. "Of course. In fact, it would be very good. Patients recovering from neurological injuries respond very well to the presence of family." Hope stood up, her legs trembling slightly. Joseph also stood up, offering her his arm. "Thank you," she said, looking at him with tearful eyes. "Thank you so much." "Don't thank me," Joseph replied. "Thank yourself for being who you are, for being the kind of person who makes fighting for a better world worthwhile." Hope didn't fully understand what he meant, but she sensed a profound depth in his words. She walked toward the ward, accompanied by the head nurse, who was now solicitous and attentive. Joseph remained in the waiting room, watching her go. He felt transformed by their encounter, as if something fundamental in his worldview had been realigned. It wasn't that he didn't know people like Hope existed. He did.
But there was something about witnessing her quiet dignity, her understated strength, her capacity to love unconditionally even in the face of adversity that touched him uniquely. He thought about his own life, his own struggles, his own victories. He thought about how many times he had been treated with respect, not because he deserved it as a human being, but because he held titles and positions that impressed. He thought about how many hopes he had encountered along the way and hadn't truly seen, how many stories of quiet dignity had gone unnoticed by his eyes. An hour later, Hope returned from the ward. Her eyes were red, but now with tears of joy. Kara was awake, had recognized her mother, and had spoken to her. There was a long road to recovery ahead, but she would be okay. "How is she?" asked Joseph, who had been waiting for her. "She's fine. Confused, but fine. She asked about the boys, asked about work. She's still my Kara." Hope smiled through her tears. "She said she had a strange dream, that there was an angel in the room. I guess it was the medication, right?" Joseph smiled. "Maybe, or maybe she's right." "Will you stay here? Your wife?" "My wife is fine. The surgery was a success. She's sleeping now, and I can go home with peace of mind." Joseph paused. "But I'd like to ask you a question, if you'll allow me." "Of course. You said your name is Hope. Did your parents choose that name for a specific reason?" Hope chuckled softly. "My mother said I was born on a very difficult day for the family. My father was unemployed, we had little money, many problems. But when I was born, she looked at me and said I was a sign that things would get better, that as long as there was life, there would be hope." And was she right? I don't know. Life hasn't been easy, I can't say it has. But whenever things got really tough, I thought I had to honor my name, that I had to keep believing that everything would work out in the end. And did it? Hope looked out the window, at the hospital courtyard where a few people were slowly walking, enjoying the afternoon sun. "It's still working out. As long as I'm here, as long as my grandchildren are growing up, as long as my daughter is recovering, it's working out." Joseph nodded. "You taught me something very important today." "Me? What did I teach you?" "That dignity isn't something you gain or lose. It's something you are. And that sometimes the most important person in a place is the one nobody is seeing." Hope was silent for a moment, processing the words. "You're a good person," she finally said. "You didn't have to do what you did." "I had to. I had to because it's right. I had to because you deserve it. I had to because if we don't do this for each other, who will?" They talked for a few more minutes, two people who had met by chance at a moment of vulnerability and who, somehow, had transformed each other. When Joseph got up to leave, Hope extended her hand. "Thank you for everything." "Thank you," Joseph replied, shaking her hand, "for reminding me of what truly matters." And then, connect with us, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell, because stories like this, stories of humanity, dignity, and hope need to be shared, need to be remembered, need to be lived by all of us. Because, in a world that often makes us feel invisible, small, or unimportant, it's crucial to remember that each of us carries within us the capacity to see the other, to honor their dignity, to be the difference we'd like to find in the world. Joseph left the hospital with a lighter, yet also heavier heart. Lighter because he had done the right thing. Heavier because he now carried with him the awareness of how many other hopes existed in the world, waiting to be seen, to be heard, to be respected. Hope remained at the hospital until late afternoon, talking to Kara, assisting the nurses, bringing water to other patients. When she finally prepared to go home, to hug her grandchildren and tell them their mother was going to be okay, she carried something she hadn't had when she arrived that morning,
The certainty that in the world there were still people capable of seeing beyond appearances, of recognizing dignity where it resides, of making a difference when it most needs to be made. 3 months later, Kara had fully recovered. She had returned to work, her children were growing up healthy, and life had resumed its normal rhythm. But Hope never forgot that day at the hospital, never forgot the man who had stopped to truly see her, to listen to her, to treat her as if she mattered. And Joseph, in turn, had changed his way of working, managing, and living. He began visiting the hospitals under his responsibility, not only as an authority, but as an observer of the humanity that unfolded there every day. He began to see the hopes in every corner, to hear the stories that no one else heard, to ensure that respect and dignity were treated not as a courtesy, but as a right. Because sometimes, in a world that rushes too fast to notice the small tragedies and great victories of everyday life, we need someone to stop, to observe, to care. Someone who recognizes that behind every case, there's a story. Behind every problem, there's a person. Behind every weight, there's a heart beating with hope. And who reminds us all that we don't need uniforms or titles to be heroes. Sometimes it's enough to have eyes to see, ears to hear, and a heart big enough to care about the dignity of others. Because in the end, that's what makes us human. Our ability to recognize the humanity in each other, especially when it most needs to be recognized. The story of Hope and Joseph spread quietly through the city hospital, the way these stories spread, from mouth to mouth, from heart to heart, reminding everyone that small gestures of recognition and respect can transform not just a day, but a whole life. And that, in a world where it's easy to feel invisible, small, or unimportant, sometimes all we need is someone to see us, to hear us, to remind us that we matter. And so, on a typical Tuesday afternoon, two people discovered that humanity still lives, still pulses, still manifests itself when we least expect it and most need it. They discovered that hope isn't just a name, it's a way of life, a choice we make every day, a light we ignite for others that, in the process, illuminates our own path as well.